And hello everyone, welcome back to another Flask tutorial. In this tutorial we'll be taking a look at login to work. Because we have sign up, we have the home page, but no one can log in, which is unnecessary. So let's go to auxiliary py because we need to add a few extra functions here. So right here underneath encrypt string, I would like to add a verify encrypted string. So we want to verify that the passwords when they log in match. We don't want to try and decrypt the password because the idea is the password should not be able to be decrypted. You should only be able to verify by comparing an encryption with another encryption. But you'll notice we can't just encrypt what we get and then compare them because passwords will change the value that gets stored. We can actually see this if we were to go here and run our code. If we were to go to sign up and we were to go to here and just make equal to password, and we know one of our users has the password. We say sign up. I have been signed up. Now when I go here to the database, I just say open containing folder and then open it up with my database manager. If we go to browse data, you'll see Eki here, but Eki's password doesn't match Jack's password, which is password. So they have the same password, but in the database they look differently. So we can't just try and encrypt a string and then match them together because that won't work. Instead, we need to encrypt the string in the right way to make sure that these two match. Or not these two, but the one that we are trying to test against. So that's what this is for. We are going to try and encrypt the string the same way we encrypted the string when we tried to sign up. So now here we can say stored str, this will be a string, and in the provided str, which will also be a string, and then it will return a bool. So if the two matched. And then here is our documentation, compares hashed string with string provided by user and returns if they match. So the stored string is the string that has already been hashed, so what's in the database. And then the provided string is the string that should be compared to the stored one. So this one will be hashed, this one will not be hashed. Cool. Now our stored string stores the hash inside of the string, or the salt. The salt is what determines what this string will look like. And each salt here is different. So here you'll see we have salt and then we add it to this string hash. The salt is about 64 characters in length. So what we can do is we can say salt is equal to stored string 64, and this gets the salt. This isn't a very safe method. Please take note. The method we're using to do encryption isn't super safe. If someone gets into the database and they notice something even slightly suspicious and think it might be this, then everyone's passwords can basically be hacked in a sense, because now they know the salt for each password. They can just write a script to do this. What we're doing here is just a very basic example of how we could do it. But generally you want a specific salt stored not in your code but in an env file or something. Alright, and we also have our stored string, which we now want to make stored string 64 colons. So everything after the salt. We can then go str hash is equal to hash lib dot pb kdf2hmac. We can then specify SHA-5112 or 12 and provided string dot encode utf, and we can just say salt dot encode into ASCII. And again, you don't need to understand a lot of this. and we just need to specify the amount of times it should be ran. These two can actually be constants. So if you wanted to, you could go something like rounds, which would be a constant of this. And then whenever you change this rounds, it will change everywhere here. So this is also an option. In this case, we're not going to do that. So you don't have to understand most of this. This might go over your head. This is perfectly fine. Generally, the things in auxiliary.py doesn't need to be understood perfectly. It is perfectly fine if you struggle to understand this, because these things are usually the bit more complex things that you might forget how it works after a week of not working with it. Then we can again go str hash is equal to bin ASCII dot hexlify str hash dot decode ASCII. And then finally we return if the string that has been hashed is the same as the stored string. Okay, so this is to verify if the encrypted string is the same. And then finally at the end we can create a define guest sign in. So if it's a guest session basically, and this doesn't really return anything, this will allow us to view the website as a guest. So this gives non-signed in users a random session ID and the username guest, as well as set their status as guest. This will allow them to still use the website without an account. Cool. We can then say session, and of course session comes from up here, and we can also go random, and then from Flask import flash session. Then we can go session, and we want to specifically store the ID here is equal to random.randint 1 and then 9999999. Of course, you might want to change this. You might have like 1 million users that comes to visit your website on a day. Then this won't work as well, but this is like a temporary method, you know, until you get a better way of doing this. Session username is equal to guest. Session guest is equal to true. So we're setting that they are a guest and we're making it true. And this will all be stored in the browser. So this isn't the most secure or the best way of doing this, but it works. And we can of course flash signed in as guest user. And you can flash it as info. So if they signed in as a guest user, so they didn't sign up or log in, they will get this. Finally, let's go to the users DB here. I want to add a function. Define update user DB field. This will allow us to update fields in the database for the user. Username, value, and field that we want to update. This will just basically save us having to write this code over and over again. And you can say by default it's username. So basically, this is the username of the user. So this would be like a string. You could add this if you want to. And in this value is what you want to put it as. This can be of any type. And then this is the field, which should usually also be a string. Then here we can say user is equal to users.query.filter by. So we're trying to filter and getting the user name is equal to username dot all at index 0. Now take note here, you might get an index error here. You should do checking to make sure you don't get an index error here. Or even instead of using dot all, try and use dot first and then checking if first is a null value. So if you get this and you get none, then that might be a good idea to then say this user doesn't exist. But in our case, I'm just going to do the easy way out and do this. But if you ever want to take this website and create your own file sharing website that isn't for torrenting, you know, then you could do something better here. But this is just so we can get an easy way out. We then go users.query.get or 404 user.id. So we're going to try and get this user's specific ID. If we are unable to get their ID, we should return a 404 error. Then finally here we can say if field is equal to username, and here we can add in else if field is equal to password mod and then date access. So mod date accessed, and then finally at the end we want to say db.session.commit. Okay, then here we can just say user.username then becomes a value. What we can also do is say here this is of type users, meaning we will get auto completion here. So if we say user dot and then here we get auto completion, password it then becomes value, and then user.mod is equal to value, and then finally user.date accessed is equal to value. So basically this just automates the updating process. We say who we want to update from, we tell it the value we want to update, and then we give it the field we want to update, and then it will figure out what to do on its own. This is an optional step. This as well as an optional step. You could just as well ignore this one actually and just get this one. Anyhow, this is perfectly fine. You could of course improve this a lot. I'm just giving you the basics so you can work on this and improve yourself. And then finally we can go back to our routes in root, and let's import a few extra things. So here we also want to import session and make response. Then here inside of our index page, we can collapse this. And after our reverse torrents, we can check if the request.method was of type post. Then username is equal to request.form uname. And we discussed this in a previous video where we checked that the uname and password uses these on the form, because the login and sign up uses the same page. Then we can try user becomes users.query.filter by, you could even change this into a function so you don't have to constantly do this. Username is equal to username. So you just create a function, pass in the username, and it will return an index error if there's an index error. .all at index 0. Except if we get an index error, in which case we want to return redirect URL for root.login, and we can specify auth equals fail. So it's going to go to the login URL, so this one right here, and say auth failed, meaning we get this auth failed, username or password is incorrect, which is pretty self-explanatory on what this does. If the username or password is incorrect, then they'll get this error. In this case, if their username is incorrect, we won't be able to find their user. So it will just say it failed. Then you can say if verify encrypted string user.password and password, then session ID. So if these two match, so if the user's password that they entered and the database password that they have are the same, then we can make that equal to the user.id. And in session username is equal to user.username. And of course it should be like that. And then finally, if user.mod, then session mod is equal to user.mod. Then finally, we want to update the last time they have been logged in. So if they are logging in right now, which if their passwords are correct, and it's update user DB field, user.username, and it's a date time dot today, and then finally date accessed. And then finally, once they get to this point, we can return render template. index.html. We can pass in the torrents, which is equal to reverse torrents, the session details, which is an array session, and in the RSC, remove special characters. And take note, I'm not putting any brackets here. If you do that, you might get an issue. No brackets. And then finally, we can say else if this is the case where they did not get this verify encrypted string. We can return redirect URL for, so if they tried to log in but their password was incorrect, then root.login, and we can just say auth is equal to fail. Finally, then now here we can say, and take note this is outside of this if request method is equal to post. So you'll notice there the line ends and now we're starting here. You can say if not ID in session. So if there's not an ID in their session, we can just say guest sign in, and that will do all of the guest stuff for us. And then finally here at the end, we also pass in session. So all the session information is equal to, so now we have logout, login, and it works. But now we also need to implement logout, because what if the user wants to finally log out? If that's the case, it's pretty simple. We just copy this because this is a lot of unnecessary typing. Paste it, logout, and this doesn't need a get or post. We can say logout, and in here we just say session.pop ID. We set that to none, so we're basically setting this ID to the value of none. So this is the session values. And you do the same for mod username guest. Then you can also say if request.args.get and then ACC deleted. So if they decided to delete their account, we're going to have to log them out anyway. So we do it here in the logout. We can then return redirect URL for root.login, and you can just specify ACC deleted is equal to true. And then finally we can return, if their account was not deleted, redirect URL for root.login. There we go. Now if we were to just stop and start this again in case there was a lot of things, we refresh, yeah, this is sign up. Okay, now I've logged in. We can now say Jack, and I believe his password was password. There we go. So we did log in as Jack, and here we have a bunch of options now because we're not guests anymore. If we click on logout, will we get an error because it's trying to go to /. Here we go. So that's fine. That's fine. Here we go. We don't want that /. Same here. We don't want that /. I mean, we don't want that. And then here's the logout. And that as well. Okay. And then this should work once we've removed all of these / that are not required. Okay. Now when we go back here, we just run this again. We refresh. Okay, now we get to logout. We logged out. If we then go in here without logging in, it will tell us we have signed in as a guest user. We go to sign in. We say Jack, password, login. So now, here we go. Our login works, our logout works, and yeah, it's just neat. And that's that. Thank you all for watching. I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you all again in the next Flask tutorial.